so delighted and honored to have Geraldine Brooks discussing her essay in the book, Who is Government, with Lanny Breuer. Geraldine Brooks is a Pulitzer Prize winning author and a former foreign correspondent. Born in Sydney, Australia, she has lived full-time on Martha's Vineyard for over 20 years. Her best-selling novels include Caleb's Crossing, The Secret Chord, and Horse. Brooks is also the author of the acclaimed nonfiction, most recently published Memorial Days, a poignant memoir of sudden loss and the search for peace. She contributed to the book edited by Michael Lewis, Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service, a tribute to the vital, often unseen work of public servants. Geraldine is a member of the Martha's Vineyard Book Festival Advisory Board as well. Lanny Breuer, Vice Chair of Covington and a former Assistant Attorney General for the Criminal Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, is considered one of the top trial defense attorneys in the country. A fellow of the American College of Trial Lawyers, he specializes in high-stakes criminal and civil investigations. From 2009 to 2013, while at the U.S. Department of Justice, he was widely acknowledged as a thought leader in the area of criminal law enforcement. Please join me in welcoming them both. Thank you.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Lanny Breuer, and Geraldine, as I told you a few moments ago, it's a remarkable honor for me to get to interview you. And, you know, I've never done this before, so you're going to save me.
Well, it's an honor for me to sit with you because you're at the law firm that didn't capitulate to Donald Trump.
So Geraldine, in the book, Who is Government, Michael Lewis brought on a number of really highly acclaimed authors to profile individuals in the federal government. So can you tell us how Michael Lewis got this project going and how he reached out to you and how this all began?
It goes back to the first Trump administration, in fact, to the transition. Because the Obama administration had wanted to prepare a really seamless transition and had asked every government department of the public service to prepare detailed briefings for the incoming government. And Trump, of course, fired his transition team, and so nobody turned up to get briefed. And Michael Lewis thought, well, I'll do it. And he found just a wealth of amazing stories. And he thought, there's so many great stories here. I'm just going to do the most random thing. There's an award every year for very distinguished achievements in public service. And there's a list of the public servants who have won it. And he just got the list. And the first name on the list was A. Arthur Allen. And so he took that guy and found him. And it was when, it was during, by the time he got around to this, it was during the government shutdown, so A. Arthur Allen was at home. And so he didn't have to go through any bureaucracy. He just showed up at the guy's doorstep and said, what do you do? And he was the only oceanographer employed by the Coast Guard, and what he had devoted his life to doing was finding things that fall overboard. And a surprising number of the things that fall overboard are actually Americans. So he he had figured out how, by throwing different things of different weights into the ocean and tracking them, he came up with a model that is now used worldwide and has saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. And that guy was on furlough because he was considered a non-essential worker. And that's what got Michael's juices flowing, and he wrote a book called The Fifth Risk, which was all about the people he met. And as he describes it, he thought that he had found a little bit of alpha, like in investment. He'd noticed a mispriced bond and, been able to capitalize on all these great stories in the federal government. And he thought, surely other reporters are just going to flood in there and get these riches that are waiting to be picked up everywhere you look. There is another great story. And nobody did. And so moving right along, as Trump starts and Vance and everybody talks about how they're going to slash the public service, this is before the administration has come into power. Michael and the then editor of the Washington Post editorial page decided that they would do this again, just throw writers into this assignment to find somebody in the public service who is doing something extraordinary. And I think there's about 6 of us, and it took each of us about 5 minutes to find a subject. And I think the stories in this book are absolutely remarkable.
Well, the stories are remarkable, and of course, you profiled Jared Koopman, who's the executive director of the Cyber and Forensics Unit of the IRS. So how did you find Jared Koopman, who's a fascinating figure, and tell us about how you decided both he's the guy I want and I'm going to write about him for this?
Well, I thought to myself, if you're going to defend government, let's defend the most unpopular branch. So I went straight to the head of the IRS because I wanted to, not get enmeshed in a whole bunch of argy-bargy. I wanted somebody who could make the decision. And I thought that Danny Werfel, who was then the IRS commissioner, would get it, and he got it straight away. And he was the guy that was brought in by the Biden administration to fix the IRS, which had been allowed deliberately to be run into the ground. It had the lowest staffing levels since the 1970s, even as the American tax-paying population had ballooned, and not a penny had been spent upgrading any of their tech. And so, everything was stuck together with string and spit. And the Biden administration poured money into modernizing the IRS, and Werfel had made some good headway on that before, of course, the bottom has now been pulled out again. And it's all, it's this Grover Norquist idea of shrink government so small you can drown it in a bathtub, and make people angry at the IRS because they're getting such poor service. But it's not the fault of the poor people who are just trying to do the work of 10 people with crappy equipment that nobody in the private sector would ever be asked to use.
So did you get Jared Koopman because the IRS commissioner suggested that was the person you should profile?
Yeah, basically. They had somebody else in mind, but, these amazing public servants are so self-effacing and so not looking for credit. The first person who'd done something absolutely terrific said, "I never speak to the press." And then they gave me a couple of other ideas, and I decided that Jarrett had just done so many extraordinary things with his very small team that he would be the guy. But I had no idea what an amazing character he would turn out to be.
And we're going to talk about that and what his unit does. But you begin your essay with Jared Koopman in his spare time, and he has so many remarkable talents. But he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu teacher.
Yeah.
And tell us about how you decided that was going to be the scene that you would start the essay. And was that a metaphor for what you think he does as a public servant?
Yeah, it is.
And describe the scene for everyone.
Well, I don't know how many of you have ever seen Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a lot of grappling, right? It's a very, very sweaty business. Anyway, I went, he teaches several mornings a week, early at 6 o'clock in the morning at this gym in Western New York. And I watched him, he's a black belt, and it's very hard even harder than in most martial arts to reach that level. So he's really good. And he's about 180 pounds, and he was grappling with a 280-pound guy, looked like twice his size, and he had him down and pinned in like 2 seconds flat. And it's very much like what cybercrime does in the IRS. There's only 200 agents spread out all across the country and the world, in fact. And yet, in the last 10 years, their work has returned $12 billion to the U.S. taxpayer. has saved 23 children who were being actively abused, has put 370 child abusers in the slammer, has shut down the fundraising apparatus for Hamas and ISIS. And I kind of think of them as a nerdy SEAL Team 6.
I don't know how nerdy you can be when you're a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Well, he's actually an accountant.
So we're going to talk more about what he does, but you have a paragraph in your essay that I just kept rereading. In describing Koopman and then talking about all that he does, you write the following, as obviously this tent is filled because of what a great novelist you are and writer you are. And you wrote the following: "Let me pause here for a moment. I am a novelist. I make things up for a living. In my trade, it would be considered malpractice to make up Jared Koopman. You just do not give your protagonist a set of attributes that includes black belts, vintage cars, sommelier certificates, tattooed biceps, a wholesome all-American rural family, and a deeply consequential yet uncelebrated and under-remunerated career in global cybercrime. But as Mark Twain said, fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't." So tell us the challenges about writing about Jared Koopman.
Well, the first challenge is, I think, because the public service is so used to being beaten up and pushed around, there's a great defensiveness. So even though I had Danny Werfel's seal of approval, and even though Jared Koopman is obviously an extremely confident kind of a guy, I had to still navigate the wall of PR minders that you put up around that are put up around people. So supposedly there was going to be one of these people at every interview, and this is not working for me. And I knew that Jared was speaking at a conference in Arlington, and I thought, this is a guy who's going to arrive early, so I'm going to arrive even earlier, and I'm going to get 5 minutes with him by myself, and I'm going to get his phone number and home address. And so once I had that, it was all good, because then I could contact him directly, and he knew what he was doing. He didn't need a minder, So that was just the rules of the game that they have to play by.
So writing about someone who almost seems like a superhero, was it simple to write about it? Was there any gray area or moral complexity to him or his team or what they're doing in your view?
No, I think what they're doing is fantastic. But what the difficulty was, I had to get my head around Bitcoin, because what they do is trace.
Can I interrupt? If you haven't read it, Geraldine does a really good job for us who don't really understand Bitcoin. You should read those couple of pages.
My favorite thing I found on the internet, the best description of it is kind of a cynical description, but it's like if you idled your car 24/7 and it occasionally resulted in spitting out solved Sudokus that you could then exchange for heroin.
So in writing about this team, about Koopman's team, you do talk about the fact that they have saved the life of many children who have been abused. They're responsible for arresting pedophiles. And as you said, they brought in over $12 billion of money that was illicit, that came from money launderers and terrorists. And drug dealers and the like.
And they've also got back a lot of money for scammed people, too. Like, a lot of these so-called crypto exchanges were very hackable. And people got hacked and lost all their money. And these guys, who are so excoriated by the whole cryptocurrency bros, hate the IRS, and yet the IRS is what's making it a safer space for them to go and make their pile of money.
So obviously you're a remarkable storyteller, and it seems like this unit and other analogous units in the IRS are really providing so much. They're a remarkable return on investment. So why doesn't it break through? Why isn't it that when Michael Lewis writes his first book, that lots of journalists want to profile public servants? And why isn't it that now that Who is Government is out there, that the Trump administration, Elon Musk and others are still so able to disparage public servants each and every day?
I think because too many people watch Fox News. No, really. I mean, the Fox commentators so mischaracterize, so the criminal unit of the IRS is teeny tiny, and it is such a piñata for these guys and women and Lauren Boebert and all that ilk who are always out there saying things that are simply not true, that the criminal investigation unit are coming to kill middle-class taxpayers. It's just obviously bullshit, but it's just said over and over again. And the Republicans even put a rider on a spending bill limiting the amount of ammunition that the IRS criminal division can have. And honestly, Jared Koopman's been 24 years in this job putting bad guys away, and he's never discharged a firearm in the course of his work. But you can't go into a criminal enterprise unarmed. You're not going to break down the door of somebody who's running a pedophile website or a drug dealer and not have a weapon. So you have to train, and you need ammunition for that. And they're not allowed to have enough ammunition to train.
So someone like Jared Koopman, does it get him down? I mean, he must be aware that everyday public servants like himself are just being criticized so unfairly. Does he care? Does he just simply zone it out? What was he like about that?
He is totally mission-driven guy. He does not, that doesn't even touch him. He's just getting on with the job, and he really just wants to protect us all from bad guys, basically. He's really one of those people that you hope go into law enforcement.
You had a really interesting statistic that the IRS is able to bring in so much more revenue given the relative little amount that they're providing. One thing that really hit me was that in talking with Jared Koopman and others, you point out that there are 6 million taxpayers today who earn so little that they qualified for the earned income tax credit, but they don't ask for it. And that there are 25,000 people in the United States who earn more than $1 million a year who haven't filed a single tax return since 2017. So when those statistics come out, can't that galvanize a community to care more and to support the IRS?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
You would.
But no, so what's happened since Doge got in, the first thing that happened to Jared's division, it's really hard to recruit for cybercrime in the IRS because anybody who's got the necessary skills can earn 4x the money in the private sector. And there's a clamor for those people. So if you can find young, mission-driven people to join this work, it's a big win. And he had 60 people who were in the first or second year with his division, and they were all sacked. And it's law enforcement. It was supposed to be exempt. So he immediately raised his hand and said, "You sacked all these people. Mistake, they're law enforcement." And they go, "Oh, right. Well, you can hire them back." He got back half of them. The others had all found other jobs. So you're just eating your seed corn. Who's going to look after us in the future if this is the attitude? Yeah.
So Geraldine, some of the other public servants that are profiled in the book are also remarkable. There's engineer in the mine safety division that invented a way of securing the roofs of mines, and almost immediately the deaths that had occurred before and are over.
That was Michael's story, and again, he went to the list of people who'd been recognized, and he saw the name, which is escaping me right now, and there was 3 lines, was a miner, a former miner. And he immediately in his head thought, this will be a great story. The guy grew up in West Virginia and maybe lost somebody in his family in the mines and then saw all this terrible stuff. So he calls the guy, and the guy says, well, I grew up in Princeton. My father was a professor. And he actually became a Marxist as a teenager and wanted to go and, organize the workers. So he thought he would do that in the coal mines. And while he was there, he saw the terrible conditions and the way the mining companies were not spending money to investigate what they could do to stop mine roofs collapsing and hundreds of people killed every year. And so he devoted his life to solving that problem.
And what's so interesting about this fellow, who did grow up in Princeton, if you read it, is he figured out a way to create secure roofs on mines. His father was a professor who understood how Gothic and older cathedrals were built all over, and his father was an academic, and it took his father decades, according to the essay, to recognize his son's accomplishments.
It's a great father and son story, actually, because there was so much tension between them, and particularly, this kid was very rebellious, obviously, with his Marxist views, and you're raising your kid, and he doesn't want to go to university. Well, he did, in the end, go to university because he became obsessed with this problem of keeping the roof up. But until Michael pointed it out to him, he didn't see the link between what his father did and what he did.
And there's so many others. There's the fellow who's in charge of all the military cemeteries.
This is Casey Sepp's story, and I think it's one of the most beautiful stories in the book. It is so touching, the amount of care and attention to the detail of every blade of grass, every speck of dust, that this guy who runs these military cemeteries has a standard of excellence that, private industry cannot match. And this is actually demonstrated because they do a survey every year of consumer satisfaction. And the highest is not FedEx, it's not Dunkin' Donuts, it's the National Military Cemeteries has the highest rating of consumer satisfaction. And when you consider that people who are visiting a cemetery are often in a state of great grief or crisis, but the ethos that this guy has instilled is just something that is so beautiful and so remarkable. And Casey just tells this story with great sensitivity and flair.
I mean, it's so remarkable. There's an example where they talk about one of the people who works for him, and they're committed, and they talk about a young woman who's, I think, visiting maybe her father who died, and it's pouring rain, and the fellow who works there literally takes off his boots and he gives it to her. And there's example after example like that.
Yeah.
And then the one that they're all so interesting. There's also a chapter in there about the CPI index, the Consumer Product Index, and no public servant at all is profiled. It's all about everybody who works and all of the reasons why it's so important.
Yeah, and that's by John Lanchester, who is just a wonderful English writer. And he talks about, the Enlightenment was all about seeking knowledge. And the Endarkenment, which is what we're now experiencing, is about destroying knowledge. And I think 48 hours ago, Trump sacked the head of the department that is responsible for this number because he didn't like the labor statistics number. He thought that the jobs number was too low. And so if he doesn't like the data, he sacks the messenger. And it's the CPI itself, as John explains how it is constructed, the incredible level of detail prices, people actually going out and looking at the prices of something in Buffalo, a stick of butter in Buffalo, and it's a whole basket of things and meticulous work. They've cut them back now, so they have to impute instead of going out and finding the truth. They impute what the truth might be. And if you cut it back, they've cut the number of cities that it's done in. So the CPI has already been weakened in terms of the purity of the data.
Yeah, I mean, I worry that we're just telling a story that everybody hears every day over and over, and we all feel the same. But if you read the essay in the CPI, it's almost mind-blowing, all of the data, all of the statistics, all of the provision, how it's revised to make it seem as pertinent as possible. And then in one fell swoop, the president just fires the head of labor statistics. And you know on some level there's an outrage out there, but comparing it to the essay, to me, really, it was so shocking given all of the public servants who work tirelessly to create this index that's so important in all our lives.
Yeah, well, and also Social Security is based on it. So many things are based on it.
Contracts every day.
Yeah. No, so, it's...
So did you speak to the other authors, and did you all have very similar reactions and similar activities in writing your essays, or was there a difference? I'm curious to hear about your conversation with the others.
Yeah, no, I think we were all astonished at how easy it was to find somebody to write about, and you felt like you could have opened any door and sat down and talked and got a story, really. And if you ever look at these awards are called the Sammys, and they happen every year. And every year there are just amazing stories of work that was done and just going above and beyond, like the team that was sent to Hawaii after that tragic fire, because one of the big problems there were electric car batteries were still burning, and it's an island, and everybody here can appreciate you can't just take a toxic, flammable piece of equipment and put it on a boat. So they had to invent the way to deal with this for the first time in history, and that team, risked their own health and safety to go out there and do that for all of us.
So have government servants, public servants reached out to you, or do you know of to any of the other writers of these great essays since the book came out?
They haven't. They're very self-effacing people, but we did see a lot of comments. So this series first appeared in the Washington Post, and it was by far the most widely read thing in the paper. Every time a new one came out, the readership, and they can see on the online who's reading it and who reads to the end. And these were long pieces, and it was incredible how much readership and how much comment. And a lot of the comments were from public servants saying, "Thank God, somebody appreciates what we do."
I mean, one thing that really worries me is I had the honor of serving as the head of the criminal division during the Obama administration. And when you're a political appointee, it seems to me one of your great obligations is not only to try to improve the agency you're in charge of, but to brag about the people who work for you and to get the story out. And I just don't know, how does the story come out? And you have to give us a solution when you have an administration that every day is demonizing them. It was a great joy to identify these people who no one has heard of, and to show that, they're brighter than me, they're smarter than me, and yet, this remarkable person, she's devoted the last 40 years of her life to making us all safer, and nobody's heard of her.
Exactly, and I read about the woman who wouldn't give what's his name, the anti-Semite Australian, unfortunately, actor. Mel Gibson, thank you. Mel Gibson wanted his gun back.
Right.
And she reviewed the case and said there's no grounds to give this guy. He's got, what did he have, an apprehended violence order against him? he can't have his gun back, and she got sacked, So, but again, the Justice Department is a place where you've got lawyers who could be making buckets load more money in the private sector, and yet they're mission driven.
Right. And of course, so many now have been fired. So in a moment, I'm going to open it up to audience questions. But if Jared Koopman were here today, what would you want someone in the audience to ask him?
I'd get them to ask him to tell the story of how they took control of the terrorist websites, because I love that story.
Yeah, and one thing, but do you want to tell that
I'm
story?
going to tell that
the story. Don't tease the audience.
So most of what the beauty of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency in general, mostly, is that every single transaction is recorded immutably. You cannot go back and change the data. So if you can get the identity of the person who's made the transactions, it's all there. It's a fiesta of evidence. It's golden, right? So how do you get the identity? Well, there's many different ways that you might do it, but usually it's a mistake that somebody makes. Like they don't encrypt like one line of text, or before they became a bad guy, they have a digital scar on the internet, from 20 years ago, and somebody in Jared Koopman's team finds it. And that's how they got Ross Ulbricht, who was the founder of Silk Road, and who was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 40 years and just pardoned by Donald Trump. And this guy was responsible for more fentanyl deaths than anybody coming across the southern border, and yet now he's out on the street. But anyway, going back to, so the mistake that the Al-Qassam brigades, which is the military wing of Hamas, very bad guys, had a little internet ad saying, give us money to buy weapons. They're shaking the tin cup on the internet, and they had a little at Palestinian resistance, and then they gave the hash for their Bitcoin wallet, where you could make contributions in Bitcoin. Well, from that hash, Jared's team found out how to take control of their website, and while the indictments for the people who were laundering the money for them were being drawn up in the Justice Department for over a month, all the money that was going to buy those weapons was instead going to the American victims of state-sponsored terrorism. And they couldn't resist having a bit of fun once they'd taken over the website. So if by any chance you clicked on the Hamas logo, you got rickrolled, which means you were diverted to a kitschy song from the 1980s.
Yeah, like Rick Astley. Actually, I kind of like this song. Do we have questions from the audience?
Wow, we've knocked them into...
No, over there.
Having worked in a fascinating job at the Library of Congress for 18 years, I'm very clear that there are different genotypes that take on these credit, no credit, no money causes and professions. And I think it's important to maybe recognize these are literally different kind of brain types. And I have this fantasy of dividing all of humanity into 3 baskets: the inventors, the implementers, and the maintainers. And we had a wonderful thing here at the Ag Hall 10 years ago, a fair about innovation. And I had a table, and I asked people to say which one they were, and people instantaneously knew which one or combination they were. And I just think it's interesting to think about the genetics of who ends up in which profession, et cetera, et cetera.
Do you agree?
Well, I've never characterized people in 3 categories, but I do think you see, and what concerns me from reading all of these essays is you do have people who are what I would say very much doers, but don't want a lot of attention and acclaim. And on one level, I think, but everybody wants to hear from you, so I'm going to stop in 1 second. I think that those people are very substantive, and we we on one level applaud that, right? We applaud people who work hard and want acclaim. But I worry very much that in the era we're in now, with whether it's Fox News or attention, that doesn't work anymore. And I feel like if you're going to be a public servant and you're going to do what you do, both you yourself and we have to figure out ways of telling your story, which I think this book attempts to do.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would put them in any particular box either, because one of the essays in the book is by Dave Eggers, who's a wonderful writer, and he went out to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and talked about the amazing telescope, the Roman telescope, which will be orders of magnitude more visualization of the heavens than the Hubble. And we all know how incredible the Hubble has been. And so those people are inventors. And then, I forget what your last one, maintainers? Yeah, so I don't know that the characterization works for public servants, but obviously they've slashed the budget for the Roman telescope by half. I'm really grateful they didn't kill it outright, but it effectively may kill it, because now it was supposed to be launched next year, and that's not going to happen. And so we're blinding ourselves, the ability of this planet to look out and to look back at itself. All of those things, all of the climate-related work that NASA does, that Hui and NOAA do, that relies on government support. Yeah, they're keeping the stuff that Musk was interested in, but they've slashed the NASA science budget. And so all this great science is just stopped cold.
Terrible. Sir?
I'm over here. I'm sorry.
No, you go.
Sorry, thank you. Yeah, I'm also way over here. So
And that's all Trump's fault, too.
exactly.
That's an insight.
You don't turn right. So the $6 million question, of course, is how to get these stories out there. I'm a writer for Science Magazine. We're writing all these cuts to scientists. We're cutting our seed corn for so much right now that's so important in healthcare, in detection of disease, etc. These public servants who do such amazing work. So I don't expect you, Geraldine, to go on Fox News, but we need to get to the other audiences, not just these tens of readers, right?
Yeah.
And this is a big problem for me because I teach writing too. How do we get to them? And I keep thinking maybe we need legions of young people to get on TikTok with these stories, to get onto, half of Americans aren't reading. They're just not reading their news. So how do I think this is a conversation we all need to be having, how to reach those other audiences, assuming that if we tell these great stories, they will care and have empathy. So I don't know, maybe that's something we talk about.
I think that is a really brilliant idea. Unfortunately, I'm not on TikTok, so I'll have to delegate that to my kids.
And I think maybe this was going to be our last question.
Oh, well, sorry, it's really more corollary. When I came up, it was a fresh question. But I've heard, and here's where the political expert and the brilliant writer can maybe merge, that the best way to argue against this administration is by stories and not by policies. Policies people are entrenched in, stories people will respond to. So it's pretty much what was asked, but more directly, do you think that what strategy would you favor in getting some movement, some traction against the administration? Are stories the way? Are street demonstrations? I mean, and it's easy to say everything, do whatever you can, but what do you think will move the needle?
It's because of the pre-capitulation that's happened in so many institutions that are supposed to be the guardrails of our democracy. And we saw it first at the Washington Post. We finished this at the end of last summer. And 5 minutes later, Bezos directed the paper not to make an endorsement in the presidential race, and then came back and said the editorial page would no longer do work like this. It would only write about free markets, and I forget what the second thing was. But this team was going to go again this summer on a different idea of stories that need to be told. and that's gone. The op-ed editor resigned, so much talent from the Washington Post. And that's just one tiny example of institutional capitulation. So we're really in a bind. And I think story, obviously, that's what I can do. And that's what I've been working on, is trying to tell stories that matter and that can possibly... But again, you have to... I think Pete Buttigieg is great because he goes on Fox all the time, and he's able to speak about liberal ideas in a way that conservatives can hear him. He's very good at framing arguments. And I think we possibly need to study on that a little bit more, about how to express what we believe in a way that touches things that people care about, that transcend politics.
Well, Geraldine, I want to thank you. You keep telling those stories. We'll keep reading them, and hopefully others will follow you. And that's one way we address this. But thank you for today. It was a real honor.
Thank you.